Welcome to another episode of the Creating Belonging podcast. Today, my guest is Brittany William. And Brittany, I love your LinkedIn tagline, vivacious employer brand lead, spreading positivity one smile at a time. Brittany, I would love if you would further introduce yourself in your own words.
Hi, Justin. It is great to be here with you today and to talk about creating belonging. I related a lot to the book, so I'm excited to dive into it. For those listening, my name is Brittany, but I go by Britt. I am a Black woman. My pronouns are she, they. I'm nearing 30, which is super exciting. I have been in recruitment marketing for about 6 to 7 years, coming up on my 7th year now. I work in employer brand for a digital services firm.
Thank you for sharing that, Brett. I think it's helpful in the context of the conversations we're having to have some of those identities out there so that we can frame the context. I just want to check in with you and see if there's any other identities that you'd like to share for our conversations today.
Yeah, I also identify as a queer woman. I also identify as non-binary. However, I know that I present as a Black femme or a Black woman. That will always be a part of my identity. I feel like I have so many different identities that I don't realize until I'm in that situation. But I would definitely say my queer identity, my Black identity, my femme woman identity are the big three that I would say.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing, Brittany.
Yeah.
So I understand that you have read the book, Creating Belonging. Let's dive right in. I'd love to hear, as you went through the work and thinking about the areas of the Creating Belonging model, what sparked for you? Like what areas of your life came up?
So there was a point in my life when I had just started my career that I was living in Central Illinois. I had lived there for about 5 years, going to school, doing what I needed to do. I was with my partner at the time who we were both trying to decide after graduation what we wanted to do. We looked at our finances and we were two very broke college students, or I guess post-college students. And so we decided to stay in the area. Both of us are in marginalized communities, and being in Central Illinois during that time was a bit of a reach. We knew we would be safer in a more urban area, but with our finances being the way they are and both of us being very independent only children, we were like, nope, we're going to stay here. We're going to build up our finances and then eventually move to a more urban area that's a little bit more accepting of our identities. And so by staying in that area, I went through all of the model of creating belonging. It really started when I started my first job in marketing, which is ironic because my career took a very interesting turn after graduation. I graduated with my master's in family and consumer sciences, and I wanted to focus on fashion sustainability and textile recycling, but somehow I ended up in marketing. But when you live in Central Illinois, there's not a lot of job options. And so that's how I geared up into the marketing career path that I am now on. I went into a new space that I didn't know a lot about. I actually went into the dental industry, and the town that I was working in was a very conservative town, small town, very white. And I am obviously not white. I am a Black woman, a Black queer woman at that. I really had to go in, and I'm trying to think of like what would be the best way to describe how I went in, but I was very guarded and I protected myself quite a bit. So I would say probably a little bit of the recluse when I went in, because I didn't know how people were going to react to me. I have a very ambiguous voice. So when people hear me on the phone, they don't know what my race is. And I've had a number of interviews, specifically in the Central Illinois area when I just got out of school, that would phone interview me, be super excited to meet me. And then I got to the interview and it would end within 20 minutes, if not less than that. I had about 5 interviews like that, which at the time I was like, why is this happening? And as I got older, I realized I was not a match for that company or that organization because of the way I looked. I was really nervous when I went into this job, trying to figure out how much of myself can I really be without really knowing how people are going to be treating me, especially with some of the politics that go on in rural areas. I was on guard. I was a little scared. But eventually, as I started my career there and I started making friends and learning the job and learning the team, I did start to open myself up a little more very slowly. There were a lot of instances of microaggressions. There was a lot of instances of just blatant racism that came from my coworkers or other employees. And it caused me to kind of create two versions of myself, a work Brit version and a home personal Brit version. When I was at work, I was a very bubbly, excited, positive type of employee that a lot of people attached to and they really loved. They saw that as my authenticity. For me, I saw that as a mask. I saw that as something I had to put on at 8 a.m. every morning when I would drive into work to be this version of a Black woman they wanted to see because they had so many preconceived notions of Black people in general. If you go to Central Illinois, most times if you say you're from Chicago, they're going to roll their eyes at you and be like, oh, you're one of those. So I took a lot of time debunking that, I'm actually not from Chicago. I'm from the suburbs and I grew up in a very affluent neighborhood. I went to school and I graduated with my master's, which in a lot of marginalized communities, we can't say that because we don't have the resources. I was really blessed to obtain 2 degrees. And so I shocked a lot of my coworkers. I shocked a lot of the other employees that I worked with of being this outstanding Black person that worked there. So yeah, it was an experience, but I'm sure you have follow-up questions of all the different things that I had to go through because I can see your mind just going. So lay it on me.
I will like it'll show if you're anybody's seeing this on video, but I was like, oh my gosh, I don't have a notepad out and I need to be taking notes. So the first thing that hit me was you mentioned that you have an ambiguous voice.
Mm-hmm.
And the first thing, excuse me, that I thought of was that of gender. And I thought in that moment, I thought, well, your pitch isn't that low. Like, and
I see.
then the follow-up was actually it referred to your race, as in a
Yes.
voice of race. And
Mm-hmm.
it's so interesting because I just like it makes sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
But when you say I have an ambiguous voice, the first thing I go to is gender. So it's so interesting. But
Mm-hmm.
it makes me think about, I also have I have a friend who identifies as Chinese American.
Mm-hmm.
And if you meet her, that's probably a little more obvious, but she said so many times, like she used to be in sales and on the phone, she, sounded quote white.
Yeah.
And then people would meet her in person. They're like, oh, they'd be just kind of like set back, like, oh, are you're oh.
Yep.
Okay, so I want to sit there for a second
Okay.
because
Yeah.
it's so interesting and something
Mm-hmm.
that I think is underappreciated or not talked about a
Mm.
ton.
Yeah.
Let's talk more about this.
Yeah, no, I think not only my voice too, but my name. So my name
Hmm?
being Brittany, I have been told many a times, like especially looking at my resume, because it doesn't sound ethnic, that people assume when I come in for interviews or if they're talking to me and they can't see my face, they assume that I'm white. So that's been something that I've dealt with my entire life. Growing up in the suburbs, I was one of like maybe 2 or 3 other kids of color. And so a lot of folks' frame of reference of Black people was from television and watching shows that might have portrayed Black people as, being hood or from the ghetto and, talking like, hey, girl, how you doing? Like, why aren't you doing this? Like, kind of like that. Right. And so when they meet me, they get really shocked and they're like, why do you talk like that? And I'm like, what are you talking about? This is my voice. Like this is the way that I talk. And it's very apparent that they did not know that Black people come in all different shapes and sizes, and that includes our voices as well. We're not all born in the hood or on the south side of Chicago. We come from different places all over the world. My dad is from Haiti. He's an immigrant from Haiti, and when he came to the States, he was ridiculed for his accent, which it's so ironic because he lived in New York, which is like a melting pot, but kids are kids, they want you to all sound the same at the end of the day. And so my dad worked extremely hard to not only learn English, but get rid of his accent. So if you meet him and you meet his sisters, you'd be like, you all are related, because his sisters both still have accents. And my dad has completely gotten rid of his accent. And he was about 13 when he moved to the States. And so I think as I even grew up, and this is the same with my mom as well, we were always taught to speak well, and speaking well equals / translate into speaking white to a lot of folks. But for us, it's just the way that we speak. But we also know that when we, turn on like, hey, sister, girlfriend, how you doing? Like, I'm so proud, like all that. We know that we have less opportunities than if we were to say, hello, my name is Brittany. How are you today? Because it makes white folks feel comfortable to hear their own voice or their own tone or their own inflection, I guess I should say. And I've experienced that all throughout my life. My voice has always been a topic of conversation. And I'm over here like I have a podcast and I can't stand the sound of my voice. But it's just something that as a Black person that I've had to deal with, that grew up not in an urban setting.
So I feel like we could just like keep digging in on all these different things, because there's I think you talked about how Black people are portrayed on TV. And I grew up in rural Iowa, and so I didn't have Black people in my life. And so, still even a lot of my family, their only exposure to non-white people is what they're seeing on TV. And, it's unfortunate that the media has done such a disservice to, just exacerbating negative stereotypes and not showing the full breadth of humanity. To understand, like, I can hear Britt and know that, oh, Britt is a Black woman, and that's like, that's okay. Like, that's normal.
Yeah.
You also, I had to grab on the New York City thing. So your dad being in New York, we were just in New York last weekend. And at dinner, I said to my partner, I said, the thing I love about New York, one of the things is you hear so many more accents and languages. Like, I just love it. I love the diversity, the difference, I don't know. The second thing I wanted to come back to is you talked about at work, how you were this bubbly, positive person at work, and that wasn't necessarily your authentic self. Now, I haven't known you for a super long time, but I've known you to be very pleasant and positive. And, of course, we all have our days when that's not the case. Everyone does. But I would love to dig into that a little bit more. How different was that to, had you been able to present your authentic self? What might have changed?
Oh, my authentic self, when I'm not around other people, I'm very quiet. I'm very introverted, which I think is a shock to a lot of people when they first meet me, because I do put on that persona of being very loud and fun. And I'm all those things. I'm not trying to say that I'm not, but I turn it up. I turn it up for other people, especially around white folks, just so that they feel like, oh, she's a good Black person. She's nice. She's exciting. She's fun. She doesn't remind me of, the stereotypes that I've seen on TV and things like that. And so, that's what I would say for that.
So it is, in essence, a form of code switching.
Oh, of course.
To just to be likable or appealing. It's interesting. I mostly identify as someone who has a preference for extroversion, but like I'm so on the line, and then people don't understand when I go quiet.
Yep. They're like, wait, what? What's wrong? It's like, nothing.
Like, why aren't you talking?
I need a break.
Yeah. I'm not on all the time.
Yeah.
So you kind of were, weren't able to like really lean into
Mm,
belonging while you were living in central Illinois, and then
yeah,
you moved to Chicago.
I did.
And so how did things change in the way that you
Mm,
settled into your communities in Chicago versus
mm.
in central Illinois?
Yeah, I think I'm still settling into my communities. I'm not gonna lie, living in central Illinois for as long as I did, really isolating, especially with my partner who also had marginalized identities. Like we felt like we were outcasts and that we didn't really have anywhere to go. So when we moved here, it was about, gosh, probably about 4 months before the pandemic started. So we had a very short amount of time to really get out there and meet new people and do things. And I think both of us were still getting acclimated to our community and to our surroundings. And then the panorama decided to make her appearance and make everybody go on lockdown. So then that made me and him kind of try to reconfigure like what does community look like. And so I think for us, we took that as an opportunity to kind of say, let's just take a break on trying to figure out where we're supposed to fit in and focus on ourselves, which I'm really grateful for because it made me focus down and hunker down on what brings me joy and what kind of joy I can bring out of others and what kind of spaces that I want to belong to. So long story short, I'm still finding my community in Chicago. I recently got some new friends of color, which I don't really have a lot of friends of color just because of where I grew up and even in college as well, because it was a predominantly white institution. That, it's really exciting now to look at different opportunities with these folks and meet new people and go to new places across the city and do new things. But yeah, I think I'm slowly finding it right now. And just putting myself out there way more than I had even before the pandemic, because I was really just focused on working. Like I think a lot of us were in 2019, just focused on, building up our careers and, putting a lot of value into money. And then the pandemic happened and I think a lot of people started to see like, no, I want to have more happiness in my life. I want to start exploring new things with new people and have these new experiences, and work is secondary. And so with work for me being secondary, that's been a blessing to kind of start thinking about myself and who I want to be and the types of communities I want to build. I think that's another thing too, is about building communities, which is something that I've struggled with for so many years, because it's like I can't find the community that I feel like I belong to, so why don't I just make one? But then it's the imposter syndrome of I don't have the right to make my own community, or I don't have the tools to make my own community. So now I'm happy to say that I'm in a point where I'm letting the opportunities come to me to build new relationships and be with a diverse group of folks, because that's always how I've imagined my friendships and my life and the community that I actually want to be a part of is a very eclectic group of people, diverse people from all different types of backgrounds, that we all come together with a common goal of just wanting to be the best version of ourselves and just loving each other as we are.
I don't know if you were teeing this up or not, but you basically defined how I define community in the book,
Yep.
which is a group of people coming together for, a
Yep.
shared goal or, a shared purpose. So I
Yep.
love that. Thank you.
Got you.
Um, so first of all,
Yeah.
you absolutely have a right to
Mhm.
build your own community.
Yeah.
Um, and so I'm going back to my notes.
Mhm.
The pandemic, that was
Mm.
so isolating, and I
Yeah.
think I feel like it divided us more
Mhm.
in a way, right?
It did.
Because
Yeah.
it put us in our homes more
Mhm.
so that we're exposed to fewer people.
Mm.
And if we're in our homes and only interacting with the people that are closest to us, it is highly likely that we have much less diversity in our immediate sphere.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, and you said to the city right before
Mm-hmm.
pandemic.
Yep. October
Wow.
2019.
Yeah, so barely a second to like unpack your boxes, and then you're
Yeah.
like, oh, now we
Yep.
have plenty of time to
Mm.
unpack our boxes.
Exactly. Exactly. I like the way that you thought about that. Yes.
Yeah. Um, yeah, it's interesting. You mentioned also kind of in when you were in central Illinois,
Mhm.
you talked about how you didn't really have anywhere to go. And so,
Yeah.
you wanted to come to Chicago to
Mm,
have those options.
mm.
There was something in there I wanted to dig into because
Yeah.
it's, having grown up again, in rural Iowa, like I totally get that,
Mm.
where, as a queer individual, um, there weren't spaces for me. And,
Mhm.
I
Mm.
am still a white male, so like I can kind of blend in for the most part.
Mhm.
And, speaking of the ambiguous voice, my voice is usually what gives me away.
Mhm.
There's actually a Netflix documentary, something about
Mm.
like, why do I sound gay? Something like that. And it's
Interesting.
interesting in kind of deconstructing the history of kind of the
Mhm.
the gay voice.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, I don't know, like what I wanted to come back to that, kind of didn't have
Yeah.
anywhere to go, like thinking
Yeah.
about being in central Illinois or in Chicago, like how that
Yeah.
compares and kind of just comfort level, because
Mm.
you also mentioned making more of an effort to get out and meet people in Chicago, and how
Yep.
that differs from when you were in central Illinois and the kind of the comfort level there.
Yeah, I comfort for me is always about safety.
Mhm.
So when I was in central Illinois, particularly at the time where we were staying, when I was working, there was a lot of racial tension. Like it wasn't just like, across the country, because I think it was like 2016 and we all know what happened in 2016. But there was just like a lot of tension in the community. And so being active and being out as a Black person, as a townie, quote unquote, because I had already graduated from college and I was living there full time, it was difficult to find spaces. Me and one other that I had who is a Black woman, I mean, we bonded. Like we only really had each other, and we talked so many times about all the dreams that we had about getting more Black women together and creating space and being able to share ideas and lift each other up. But we only had us, like we only had the two of us. And in central Illinois, I feel like I really kept to myself quite a bit. If I did want to do something that was a little bit more outwardly queer or outwardly Black or anything along those lines, like I would go to Champaign, Urbana, Illinois, and I would go to the U of I because it's a much more diverse campus. And so I really had to kind of pick and choose my battles of, how out do I want to be in central Illinois or where I was living, compared to like, when I go up to the burbs and visit my parents. And so when we moved to the city, obviously the pandemic did not help, but seeing so many more diverse people made me feel more safe that I can be myself, if that makes sense. Like it was an opportunity to be like, oh, well, I can walk down the street and I'm not going to get stared at for like, why are you here? Instead of it's like, oh, you like, hey, how's it going? Like I mean, granted, I will say that people in Chicago aren't as nice as people in central Illinois or other rural. that's just that's just me. But I think New York is a little bit worse, but no offense, New York, love New York. But yeah, it's being able to see yourself represented, like even though it's not necessarily like I'm seeing a stranger on the street that's Black and I'm like, hey, let's form a group together. It's just more of, there are people here that look like me, which means that I can find my community. And when I was living in central Illinois, there was one other person who looked like me. And so it made it really difficult and disheartening, honestly, to want to engage with other folks and want to build any sort of community with that.
Thank you for sharing that.
Mm,
Yeah, I get the safety being a big thing, and kind of
mm,
being, in that more rural area, being the only one or one of
mm,
two. It makes me think of a couple of summers ago. So my family's all still in rural Iowa, and
mm,
we were at the lake, and the fire department like just drove by, like small town, like they're
mm,
out cruising in the fire truck or whatever they do. And one of the firemen was Black.
mm,
And so I was kind of surprised, because I was like, this is literally a town of less than 1,000 people in rural
mm.
Iowa. So you just don't see many
Yeah.
non-white people. And I don't know if my dad will ever listen to the podcast. So, he may or may not be upset with me for sharing this, but I was like, oh, like you have, like, there's a Black guy who lives in your town. And he said, yeah, but he's one of the good ones.
Mm,
And
yes.
I was like,
Yep.
I'm sorry, what? Like,
Mm-hmm.
there, what, like, and
Yep.
going back to that TV representation,
Mm-hmm.
right? Of, it's like it's that statement is a little bit like, whoa, but
Mm-hmm.
also I spend a lot of time really trying to get myself in, like, I've spent, 44 years trying to get myself away from my dad's thinking, right?
Mm-hmm.
But actually, later
Programming.
in life, I've spent more time trying to understand his perspective. And,
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, oh gosh, like, I guess if that's your experience, if your experience is watching TV, that's it, and that's all the exposure you get,
Mm-hmm.
then that's a kind of statement that you would make, right?
Yep.
And it's unfortunate, but it's also, what's there.
Yep. It happens quite a bit, quite often.
Yeah.
Actually, I've been told that I'm a good Black way more times than I'd like to admit, which I'm like, and as a kid, like
Ugh,
to that and be like, wait, what? What does that
ugh,
mean? Like all the Black people that I hang out with are good. What are you talking about? And of course, it
yeah.
didn't take me until getting older to realize, oh, that was a microaggression. Got it.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. Is that?
Yeah, yeah. I had a lot of like thank you moments in my life. So I yeah, feel that.
uh, uh,
Yep.
it's and those I want to relate that back to the work, because those
Mm,
microaggressions sit in overbearing for individuals who
mm-hmm.
have those blinders on and don't get
Yeah.
that, like, the way that you're viewing the world right now actually isn't the way that everyone sees it.
Yeah.
And it's I hope that this work continues to peel back those blinders a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. I think it will too. I think, especially with all of the unrest that we had in 2020, like it's hard to go back. It's hard
Mhm.
to and I can see like in our landscape, specifically our political landscape, that it there's a divide that they're trying to draw between both of us. And it's about it the way I see it, it's love versus hate, and I'm on the love side. I want to love everybody, and I think everyone deserves to be loved. And there's no reason that we can't all figure this out and get along.
I love that perspective of being on the side of love.
Mhm.
We just need more of it. Uh,
Yes.
and I think that's a really great way to close our conversation today. I feel like we could sit and chat forever.
Oh yeah.
But I think that, we'd have to have a multi-part episode or something, because people would be like
Maybe next time.
tuning out. But I do want to make sure that people know. So
Yeah,
you have a podcast,
I
and it
do.
is called Your Only Black Friend. Is that right?
Yes, Your Only Black Friend podcast. I started it, I want to say maybe October of 2021. It's been a passion project of mine for a really long time, mainly because I felt alone. I felt alone in my experiences of being in spaces where I was the only brown face. And I wanted to find other people who had that experience as well. So on it, I reached out to people on TikTok, and that's how I really got started, of just meeting strangers and them posting videos about their experiences being the only Black person. I was, hey, I have a podcast. Get on here, tell your story. And I love saying this episode because it's one of my most successful episodes, and this person has become a very dear friend of mine all through TikTok. But the episode is called Trap Music and Birkenstocks. And her perspective relates a lot to mine. And we went through a lot of similar experiences, although she was South and I was in the North, quote unquote. And so if anybody's going to listen, or if you want to check it out, I highly recommend starting with that episode, just because of all of the correlations, all of the things that we've talked about today, we touch on over there as well. So yeah.
Awesome. I haven't listened to that episode yet, so I'm definitely going to check it out.
Yes,
Thank you
please.
for that. And two follow-ups to that. So number one, you are building your own community. I love
Yeah.
that.
Yep.
And secondly, I love that I love anyone and saying this as it's something I strive to do is when we don't feel we have the right representation to step out and be that representation. And
Yeah.
that's some of the additional work and research I've been doing to continue the work of creating belonging, is digging into that authenticity where, those of us with marginalized identities, if we have the privilege to be in safe spaces, we have an obligation to
Yeah.
show up for
Yes.
others.
Yep.
So I love that you're doing that. Thank you for showing up.
Yes, thank you. I'm glad to be showing up. It took a lot for me to get to this point, but the impact that I've been able to make, even if it's just been 5 or 6 text messages from people saying thank you for sharing your story, has made a huge difference. And I'm always going to be an advocate for anyone of a marginalized group to share their story, because you deserve to be heard and you deserve to share your experiences with other people and tell them how they made you feel and how you're going to grow from them, but also how you want them to grow from them. I think growth and healing is so important right now so that we can be a better society for each other.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me, Brittany. I had a great time talking with you, and I have a feeling we'll keep the conversation going
Yes.
with the recording off.
Yes. Yes. No.